Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers. Join me to talk about the NFL draft prospect, Jonah Elliss, defensive end coming out of Utah, is my guy, Jay McLovin. Jay, what's going on, man?
Hey, I am doing well, sir. Doing well. And yeah, so I see we're talking about Jonah Elliss. As you know, he is I believe he's the son of Luther Ellis, the NFL player for the Detroit Lions back in the day. So now his son is out here trying to do the same thing. He's an edge rusher coming out of Utah. Again, Logan, 6'2", 246, not a big guy at all. Very, very small to be an edge rusher, in my opinion. I don't even know if he stays at edge rusher, to be honest with you. I think if he stays at where he's at currently, then he will be an average backup or special teamer at best. If he even gets drafted, those will be the two spots. If he really wants to get a more involved role in the defensive side of life, I think he's going to have to convert over to a linebacker and try. And I think he would fit really good in a 3-4 scheme. So a lot of the 3-4 schemes that are out there, I think he would do okay there as a backup until he could get the necessary development to become a starter, because I still don't think he's quite there yet. But again, I think that's something that they should consider doing if they are going to draft this guy. He does have a high motor, so he is a very energetic guy. He has a nice inside spin move that can help him get to the quarterback easier. I think he just lacks heavy, violent hands. When you're playing the defensive end, you got to have violent hands. Like, you got to be able to jerk and shirk or whatever, and he just doesn't have that. And I think the biggest downside to him is just his size. I think he's the kind of guy that would get swallowed up by bigger defenders or bigger players. So that's the thing on him. I think he needs to either A, switch over to linebacker, or B, he needs to put on some more weight so he can handle the bigger offensive tackles that are in the league.
So before I get into my analysis, Jay, do you think that this past season he had was just kind of a shot in the dark, just maybe a fluke perhaps, that he'll kind of get engulfed in the NFL in terms of just guys who are bigger and stronger?
And that's the thing, right? There's just not enough of those good years to put together to make that assumption. I think you're going to go into this like he went into this season. You're going to go. So he's going to go to the NFL. It's going to be a shot in the dark. They're going to have to do a lot of training, a lot of development. He may be a practice squad player for a little while. I don't know, but he definitely has just more room to grow. And I don't know if he's given a big enough sample size that they can make that determination right off the rip.
So I asked that because when I look at his stats, 2021, saw very limited action. 2022, 26 total tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles on the year. But then 2023 was his best year for sure. 37 total tackles as the defensive end, 23 of those being solo, 14 being assisted. But the one stat that you see that stands out is he had 12 sacks.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at it, though, when you look at his game film and who he got these sacks against, right? He got them against some, I would say, pretty credible schools. He got 3.5 against UCLA, for God's sake. Got 1.5 against Cal, 1 against USC, who we know their O-line was very much not the greatest. 2 against Arizona State. So, I mean, he did put up some good numbers, but like you mentioned, it's about consistency. First 2 years, decent, right? Decent, but nothing eye-popping.
Right.
The thing, Jay, that is making him shoot up draft boards, and what I've seen people put him as early, man, as a second-round talent. And we see our guy, Daniel Kelly, here every week say it, the scouting combine, the draft combine. How much you can do on the bench press? What can you do against those cones?
Yeah.
That is what's shooting him up in this draft.
Yeah.
But you have to look at the game film. We preach it here.
Yeah.
Every single show.
Mm-hmm.
Draft combine's cool. Fun to watch. Fine. If you want to see some athletes look great, awesome. Go for it. But where you see, Jay, in general, this isn't just about Jonah Elliss. This is for any draft prospect out there. Where you see if they're going to get you to a Super Bowl, because that's what every team's goal should be, is on game film.
Right.
And especially if you're talking about drafting this guy in the second round,
right,
you have to hit it pretty well. First round, you have to knock it out of the park. Second round, you can get a double and be solid. Someone who's a decent player.
Right.
Jonah Elliss, is he a guy who, when you look at on this stacked defensive end draft, because they have some really good players in this draft, Jay. We got Jared Verse, Chop Robinson, Braylon Trice. You got, obviously, Leatu Latu. I mean, I would say he's bottom of, if there's a top 10, he'd be more so at the bottom of that list as opposed to the top 5. And
yeah,
I think that when you look at him, right, obviously this was great for him. He had 26 quarterback hurries as well. And as you mentioned, he's got that good pedigree. He's physical in the run game. I like that about him. Good at the point of attack. You see that good initial quickness, that initial ferocity from him. But as you said, is a guy who's got high motor, right? You see the power, you see the agility, you see all of that, but he needs to get it done throughout all 4 quarters. That's the thing. You could see it, Jay, this year in 2023. He was getting it together. And that's why he had such a solid year. That's why he got 12 sacks.
Right.
That's why he had all those quarterback pressures, quarterback hurries. That's why, and he also played a lot of snaps, 573 this season. But as you mentioned, a guy who's smaller, has a smaller frame, he's physical, he's tough, he's got good IQ. But can he get it done in the next level? I think he'll be drafted. I for sure think he'll be drafted. Would I put him in the second round? I don't know. I'm not in that position. I'm not in that GM spot to where I'm going to draft him. I think he's a guy you can draft, and I think he's a guy who can help out your team. Do I think he's an early round draft? First, second round? First round? No. Second round? No, not really. Third round, I think, is the sweet spot, Jay.
Yeah.
Third round is guys who need more development, but you have high expectations for. Yeah. You see what he did on film in 2023. That's not someone you drop late round undraftable grades. That's someone who you take a chance on in that middle round pick right there, and you see how he develops. If he works out, great. If not, that's just how it is sometimes in football. Overall, though, I think Jonah Elliss, tremendous 2023 on the field. Best season by far there at Utah at the Utes. But let's not forget, Jay, and I'll leave it at this, and I'll kick it back to you for your final thoughts. Whenever you're watching the combine, just remember in the back of your head, this is all great, but it doesn't really matter because it's not against any competition. You're battling against yourself. You're battling against a stopwatch. That's pretty much it. Jay, that's my thoughts. What's your final word?
Yeah. That's exactly what you're right. When you're in the combine, you're going against yourself. You're not going against an opponent. So you're not really seeing the full spectrum. You're not seeing the real deal, because you got to think when you're going against an opponent. So, for example, if you're going against a receiver, you got to bump them. You got there's a lot of time in that. I mean, it's a lot of things that go into that. So I don't like the combine as much. I like I said earlier, I think in a couple episodes back, just watching the game tape, and I think that's kind of where it's at. You got to watch the game tape on this guy, and look, man, I think he's around 4 or 5, honestly, around 4 or 5. And that's being good on him because he's only had one good year. I mean, if you want to jump on that hype train, go right ahead. I'm a little bit more conservative on that aspect, so I'm going to go around 4 or 5. I think it's where he should be.
Okay.
But ultimately, we'll see what happens.
Well, Jay, I appreciate the insight. We want to hear from you, our fans. Where do you think Jonah Elliss will go? Do you agree that he's a second-round talent? Or do you think he'd be a first-round talent? Or do you think he'll slide in the draft and be a middle-round selection, late-round selection? Are you a fan of his pass rushing ability? Is he going to be elite one day? Is his frame going to hinder him? We want to hear it in the comments. That's where you can let your opinion be known on Facebook and YouTube. And I'll also go check out our podcast every single week on all major podcast streaming platforms. Jay McLovin, man, appreciate you coming on, talking about Jonah Elliss, defensive end coming out of Utah. I'm your host and producer, Logan Landers. Guys, get your draft notes ready. Get your popcorn popped in just a few short weeks because the NFL draft is coming to you live Thursday on April 25th. Live show here from us starting at 7:30. You don't want to miss it. Turn on notifications, and we'll talk to you guys